In this video, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks on using the CX350. One of the first things I want to talk about is the zoom range. Zoom is outstanding on this camera. It's the widest zoom of just about any camera at 24mm focal length equivalent. Most cameras around, start at 28 or even 30, but this 24 lets you get the shot when you can't back up any further. You can zoom out wider, and that's fantastic. But the telephoto is wonderful. 20 times optical is great, but you can go even further. So check out the iZoom option, the intelligent zoom. This is a function that lets you extend the zoom range up to 24 times in ultra high def or up to 32 times in 1080 in high def, and it does it basically losslessly. The zoom can be controlled by one of three methods. You've got the rocker here on the hand grip, which is pressure sensitive. The harder you press it, the faster it goes. The other way to control the zoom, the handle zoom, this is a single speed, but you can set 100 different speeds. So you can, if you need a super smooth, super subtle creep in zoom, you can try to feather it on the proportional one, but if it's at a fixed rate, you just hold that down and it will continue at that fixed rate. So that's for certain subtle effects. It's very nice. The third way you can control the zoom is with the zoom ring on the lens. The tip here is get the latest firmware. Make sure your firmware is up to date. The original firmware, the zoom ring wasn't nearly as nice and optimized as it is on the latest firmware. It makes the zoom ring a lot nicer to use. Next, I want to talk about shooting high dynamic range video. The camera doesn't offer a typical log profile like Vlog, like some of the Panasonic cinema cameras offer, but it does have H-Log, which is a hybrid log gamma. This is a gamma that's designed to retain a tremendous amount of dynamic range and create footage that looks proper on a standard dynamic range TV and also displays properly and with high dynamic range on an HDR TV. One challenge that people find is exposing for H-Log because it's different. H-Log compresses all the tones down so that it leaves a huge amount of range at the top of the waveform. But it means that when you're monitoring the footage, it can look flat, it can look muted, it doesn't necessarily look as appealing. It will look beautiful when you put it on an HDR TV, but as you're monitoring it on the camera, it can look flat and pale. So how do you get used to what the image should look like? Until you're used to versed to shooting in H-Log, two things I'd recommend. First of all, put on the auto exposure for a second. Let it evaluate and choose what it thinks the exposure should be so that you can get an idea of where the waveform levels hit when you're in H-Log, where you want to be. When you use the automatic exposure, it's going to show the waveform monitors looking pretty scrunched down, but that's accurate and proper for when using H-Log. The tones remap to a different range in the gamma. They just do. The second thing you can do is put the LCD or the viewfinder in SDR mode, standard dynamic range. You can toggle between high dynamic range and standard dynamic range with the user button. When you view the image in HDR, it'll look flat and it'll look muted. It'll look like if you're shooting log, if you're used to shooting log, that's pretty much what it'll look like. Not necessarily what it's going to look like once you're done grading or when it's transmitted, but that's what it'll look like so you can see all the data that's in there. But if you want to see what it would look like on a standard FTV, if you want to get a good idea as to what your exposure really is supposed to be looking like, pop it over into SDR mode and it'll stretch that out and it'll boost up the saturation, it'll boost up the contrast, and you'll see what the end product displayed on a proper HDR monitor will actually look like. Little tip on networking. When you're setting up the network, DHCP can be your friend. DHCP is an automated way for the camera. If you set the camera in client mode, let's say you're trying to connect to a computer or to a router, you set the camera in client mode on DHCP and it will interrogate the router and they will figure out all those settings, the IP out of the 192.168.2.8. They'll figure all that out for you. If you are doing a direct connection between the camera and an iPad or something like that, set the camera in DHCP mode, set it in server. The iPad, when it connects, or the Android tablet or whatever you're using, when it connects to the camera, they will negotiate themselves and solve all the network compatibility and proper numbers and settings that they need. So DHCP can really make it a lot easier in going into a network connection. Another small tip, when you're navigating the menus, there's a way to really accelerate the process. Okay, first of all, my favorite way to use the menus, there are 3 different ways. You can use the touchscreen, you can use the wheel on the side of the camera. I prefer to use the buttons here up under the LCD panel. You have up, down, left, right, menu, and exit. When you're in a menu and you want to be able to scroll quickly through the items, you can just press and hold these buttons down, and it will make it much simpler to get through a long list of potential options. You can do the same thing with the wheel. Just when you select an item, or when you want to choose that item and manipulate the choices, press the wheel in like as if it was a button, hold it in, and then push the wheel down or push the wheel up, and that will start automatic scrolling through. And it starts slow and gets faster and faster until it's really flying through there. So this is a great time-saving way to get through the menus. And that's just a few tips and tricks on using the CX350 to get the best out of it. If you want to learn more, download the free book that I wrote that Panasonic makes available to you on their website for a free download, The Guide to the CX350 Camcorder. It's over 200 pages of detailed information on CX350. Anything you want to know should be in those pages, and it's made available to you free, so be sure to get your copy. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned to this channel. Check out the other videos because there's a lot more videos here on the CX350.
Panasonic.